Good morning. Javier Becerra, Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, joined by my colleague, Vice Chairman Joe Crowley from New York, where we just engaged in a good conversation on a number of subjects, but most of the time devoted to the subject of trade and Trade Promotion Authority, TPA, a fast-tracked authority that the President is seeking. At this stage, we're not sure when this trade vote may come up. Our Republican colleagues had given the impression that it would occur this week before we left town a week and a half ago. But at this stage, we're told maybe sometime this month. So we'll see. But we wanted to give our members an opportunity to prepare for that important vote because it is consequential for a lot of Americans. And our members want to make sure that they have as much information as possible about that trade vote that's coming up. I wanted to mention a couple of other issues that obviously are pressing. One of them is the surveillance activities of our country to try to make sure that we keep Americans safe, at the same time protecting our constitutional liberties. And so that's an issue that is before us again because it appears that the Senate was unable to get its work done as Majority Leader McConnell on the Republican side had promised. And at this stage, there seems to be an internal fight, a civil war going on among Republicans about how to deal with national security and what to do about civil liberties. And we're hoping that they resolve that soon because on a bipartisan basis, the House did resolve the matter. Still some issues here in the House with the bill, the USA Freedom Act that was passed. But at least the House did its work, and we're hoping that the Senate will do its work because while many of us are very concerned about civil liberties and the protection of people's privacy, we also want to make sure we're doing everything possible under the Constitution to provide the security and protection that we expect so that we'll be free of terrorist attacks and harm in the future. So we're hoping that the Senate Republicans will get their act in order and get things done. The American people expect us to deliver when we get elected to get things done. And I don't think anyone on Main Street who operates the smallest business would expect that the largest economy and the most important country in the world would operate this way, at least not its governing body. And so we hope that gets done very soon. Finally, we are still dealing with appropriations bills to get the budget in place, and it appears that that too is stumbling. But we hope that there can be progress on a bipartisan basis. Two bills, one dealing with transportation and housing, which typically should get a lot of bipartisan support, is failing again. And another bill which is important to our public safety back home for our police officers, our sheriff's departments, also seems to be failing. But we'll see where we go on these things. The clock is ticking. We're into the 6th month of this calendar year, and we're finding that there is a very difficult time moving forward with some success. I do want to end on one bright note, and let me see if I can pull that up very quickly here. Today, President Obama is going to do something very special because it was long overdue. Two individuals that I can name to you today are going to be receiving a Medal of Honor. A Medal of Honor because they were denied that Medal of Honor previously. And I think it's important for us to know when we do something right that we're going to take care of business the right way. Two individuals, Private Henry Johnson was a soldier during World War I. He bravely saved the life of a wounded American soldier, prevented him from becoming a captured American soldier. He repelled a surprise attack by the enemy. He was part of what was called the Harlem Hellfighters Regiment, and he was recognized for his heroism. But back during World War I, when black soldiers were not allowed to fight alongside white soldiers, this is a man who never received the Medal of Honor. Today, he will. And I think it's a fitting tribute to our country that when we know that justice delayed is justice denied, that we redeem ourselves as an American democracy. And I think it's a tribute to all of our soldiers who pay a heavy price, that they can know that the country they fight for will try to do right by them. I want to mention also Sergeant William Sherman, who too was a World War I soldier who too risked his life to save fellow soldiers. He too was deprived of a Medal of Honor until again today, when President Obama will posthumously award him his Medal of Honor as well. So to Private Sherman and to Sergeant Sherman and to Private Johnson, we say thank you for your service posthumously. To your families, thank you for your patience, but enduring belief in the quality and redemption of America's democracy. That's a good note to conclude my remarks, because I think it's important to know that while sometimes we don't get it right, sometimes things move slowly, and Congress is probably the best example of that. We still have Americans who excel every day and in our history. And with that, I'll yield to our Vice Chairman, Mr. Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Although called the Congressional Medal of Honor, maybe it's a good thing that Congress has very little, if anything, to do with the awarding of those medals, or they would never be given out. Let me also just unfortunately begin on a somber note, and that is to express the condolences that were expressed this morning by the leader on the loss of Beau Biden. Our thoughts and prayers are with the Vice President and his family. Although I don't think it was entirely unexpected when you lose someone so young who also served his country in Afghanistan and had served his state of Delaware. And quite frankly, the world was his oyster. The loss of it's almost for me personally, I could not comprehend losing a child, even though that child may be 46 years of age. It's still your baby. It's still your son. And so our thoughts and prayers are with the Vice President and his family as they move through this very, very difficult time. Once again, we find ourselves back in Washington after the Memorial Day week. I'd like to think that things have changed, but it's pretty much the same old, same old. Once again, we have an artificial deadline coming up with the expiration of the Import-Export Bank. You would think after having shut down the government, threatening to not pay our nation's debts, threatening to shut down the Department of Homeland Security, another fake deadline, and most recently with the very short extension of the Highway Trust Fund, is continued the creation of these artificial deadlines is really hurting our country. The Republican Party and the House of Representatives leaders of the Republican Party have absolutely no vision for America. They continue to demonstrate that by these artificial deadlines and really not thinking long-term about the health of our country and our nation and moving forward. It's our hope that, as the Chairman mentioned, a number of issues that are before us, that we can come to some long-term resolution, especially for a jobs bill, something we've been calling for, clamoring for. America and Americans need jobs. Although the economy continues to churn, the one area that we still need to see is more opportunities for those on the lower rung of the ladder. And until that happens, I think we'll continue to see a doldrum within our markets. So I would hope that this Congress would start to enact legislation where their mouth is. Can't keep talking about jobs when you're not actually passing a jobs bill. Let's get to work and get Americans back to work.
Question.
President, other pro-trade advocates are really making the rounds this week ahead of really expected to see what FTA. Are you seeing any movement on their front with Obama personally calling members as well as having people to steal away from the undecided, or any possibility that himself marijuana situation?
The president's very persuasive. I know he and his team will be trying to reach out to as many members as possible and provide the information that they need to make a sound vote and pass judgment on the Trade Promotion Authority legislation. Whether they change any minds, I think most members, probably the vast majority of members, have taken a position on the trade bill, whether yes or no, and those who are still undecided, I believe, will feel the outreach by all sides. This is one of those votes where it will likely be very close, and everyone will work until the final moments to see if they can get the votes to go their way. It'll be very close. I don't think there's much more I can add to that, Joe.
I would only add that we just had a very healthy debate within our caucus, very respectful debate. Trade is important to the growth of our nation. How we go about doing that, I think, is the question at hand. I'm sure the president will be very persuasive, as will be outside interest as well. Ultimately, though, I do think it comes down to the vote itself. I think it will be very close. I'm not going to gauge whether the votes are there or not, but I do think it will be very close. But I think it's more important is that we, the Democratic Party, are having a healthy debate, recognizing that some of the activity outside of the Beltway here is not particularly helpful, I think, in terms of our caucus. But I think being there for each other and understanding what each of us are facing in terms of our districts and representing our districts the best we can is what we're all here to do. I think that many of our colleagues are facing some very difficult choices in the near future, and some are feeling some very spirited heat from outside interest groups on both sides of this issue. And so, that's not an easy place to be, I think. And I think for those of us who have already made a decision and may not be feeling that heat, our hats are off to those who are having this difficult time as well.
Also want to say, what's the message coming from leadership? They've been very hands-off on this thing, and the idea was to give members space to listen to all sides of the argument and make their own decision. Now that the vote's getting closer, is there any pressure? Is there going to be any whipping? Is there any campaigns like that?
Actually, I think the leadership has been very hands-on in trying to give members every opportunity to get the information they need to cast a vote that they feel comfortable with. The leader has made extensive use of the administration and experts on trade to have them come in and provide perspective and data and counsel on the trade matter. And so I think most members, if they want to know the details of this Trade Promotion Authority bill, have had every opportunity to get a lot of that information. Now, I know there's some members who are concerned that they don't actually have access to language in the trade legislation itself, the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is different from the vote on the Trade Promotion Authority bill. But I think in terms of TPA, Trade Promotion Authority, members have had an ample opportunity to get information based on the numerous briefings that have been provided for them, including the caucus discussion, which the vice chair led today on trade. And so what we're trying to do is make sure every member has as much opportunity to get whatever information they need to cast a sound vote on this TPA legislation whenever it should come up. And so I think leadership has provided that information. Whether leadership takes a position one way or the other, because it's an important issue on both sides, there's a very good chance that what we'll do is we'll let members go, based on the information, go where they think they must. And as I said, I think most members have come to some conclusion of where they are in the bill. We've certainly had opportunities in the past to have some of those declared candidates come before us. Governor O'Malley did come before the Democratic caucus last year. While he was not a declared candidate at that point, he did come before the caucus. And certainly this caucus will invite any declared candidate for president to come before us and address the caucus members, because the members are very interested, and of course the members of Congress will have an electoral vote to cast during the presidential election. So we're going to do everything we can to give any candidate who's interested in coming and addressing the Democratic caucus an opportunity to come before us.
Well, I do know that Mr. Goodlatte, Mr. Sensenbrenner, Mr. Nadler, and Mr. Conyers, I believe, have all signed on to a letter indicating that they're not interested in seeing amendments made to the bill. I think it's a wait and see. From my sense, at this point, what the Senate actually does produce, what amendments would be made in order and passed, if they are passed at all, and then brought back to the House.
I'd like to add, because I agree with what the Vice Chair just said. It's a very delicate balance. If you look at the vote that took place here in the House on this USA Freedom Act, there's still lots of concerns with this. You pull one provision, one pin out of this, and everything could fall. And so I think it's very dangerous what the Senate is doing. Just as these last 2 weeks of Senate activity by Senate Republican leader McConnell have been dangerous. You're toying with something that's very difficult to reach agreement on, and the House did it. There are provisions in the bill that even some of us who voted for it still have concerns about, and I certainly know that there's some passions by those who voted against it. But there's no guarantee that you come any closer to putting in place proper surveillance tools and architecture in place for the U.S. if you start to tinker with amendments on this bill that passed out of the House with a large number. So I would just urge my colleagues on the Senate side to recognize that it is tough to reach a bipartisan balance, especially these days. And unless they really believe it's going to result in a greater bipartisan level of support for a bill, they're playing with a hand grenade. Good. Thanks very much,
Thank
everybody.
you.